Hello again, Neil Dugan here. I'm going to, in this video, actually look at some of the more technical issues behind the treatment. So these are issues that we're focusing on inside the actual treatment protocol that we're implementing in the subliminal messaging. So all of the details I'm going to talk about are things which are actually focused on within the protocol. So the first thing I've already mentioned is that we are largely composed of water. And there's two aspects to this water. One of them is the free water of the body, and the other one is the actual chemically combined the chemically combined water. So most of the complex organic molecules within your body actually have water as one of their major components. So we're talking about actually chemically combined water within the body as well. You add all of that up together, you're talking about upwards of 95% of your body weight is actually water. So where is this water? Is it floating around, all of it, or what is it? So the answer to this is that we are very familiar with the idea of the blood and the lymph, and perhaps we might think of the cerebrospinal fluid or some of the other specialized fluids within the body, perhaps your urine or your bile or these other types of fluids which are being produced within your body. But the huge majority, absolutely huge majority of the water within your body is actually held within the cell, so inside the membrane of the cell. So just a bit of a refresher for you, a cell is made up of a membrane, and inside of that are a huge number of organelles, small, very small parts of the cell, and each of those actually have a membrane around them as well. And in between is what they call the cytoplasm, and in the cytoplasm the largest component of that actually is water. So, and equally actually within the various organelles there's a huge water content inside of them as well. Okay then, so how does all of this water get around? Well, one of the major ways that the water gets around the body is to do with what they call salt pumps, and through a variety of biochemical processes the body actually manages to pump the water across the cell membrane against a gradient, against an actual chemical gradient that exists within these various parts of the cell. Having the correct type of salts within the body, and particularly within these very specific parts of the cell, is extraordinarily important as well. And we have a huge focus on actually making sure that we are delivering the correct salts to the correct place within the cell. However, we're not only just utilising these salt pumps to pump the water around. There are a great number of other chemical processes where the water is actually being actively migrated around the different components of the cell as well, and indeed for that matter actually across the cell boundary. So one of the really big issues with hydration, and when people talk about becoming dehydrated, is that they're really talking about that there's not enough fluid inside the cell membrane. So what they're really focusing on is the actual amount of water sitting inside the cellular membrane. What we actually find clinically, and indeed there's plenty of scientific evidence around this as well, is that there can be deficiencies with only a few of the different types of cells within the body. So of the the many different cell types that you have, some of them can become dehydrated and others can actually be fully hydrated. I've also sort of kind of mentioned as well that you can have this differential hydration occurring say for example between the cell nucleus and the cytoplasm, the area around the outside of the nucleus. If there isn't enough of the water to actually satisfy the hydration requirements of the cell, then it's impossible for all of the larger chemicals, the more complex chemicals within the cell to actually be delivered to the correct place so that the biological functions can occur. A further issue which actually has a big impact on the functioning of the water, how well the water is working within the cell, is the pH of it. So everybody's comfortable with the idea of things being either acid or alkaline, and indeed the exact pH that's required for the various parts of the cellular functioning is different. So like from one place to another, from one type of chemical processing to another, you need to have quite different pHs. And so we're able to actually focus in on the correct balance of the pH within all these various waters of the body. Now, I've already mentioned the business of circulation, and what we're thinking about when we're talking about that circulation, generally speaking, is the macro stuff. So we're talking about the blood flow and the lymph and the cerebrospinal fluid and all those kinds of fluids. And we're looking at the way that the body is circulating all of that. Now, as I've mentioned, there's a tremendous amount of water actually sitting just between the cells. So if we've got, you know, the sort of honeycomb type of picture that we might have of all the cells all in a big bunch within the different tissues of the body, there's water or fluid actually migrating around all of these cells as well. It's called interstitial fluid. And this interstitial fluid is quite actively being moved, and there are a whole range of processes that, biological processes, which actually encourage the movement of the fluid. Many of them are relating to gradients that we've already talked about, but there are also more active circulatory sort of processes that are going on. So literally pressure related from one place to another. So there's a low pressure over here, well then there's more water moving towards it, and so on and so forth. But there are many chemical means within this interstitial fluid that create the urgency for the water to be moving from one place to another. So that principle that we're talking about for the intercellular water, the same sorts of things are actually occurring within the cell as well. So for the water to be delivering appropriately from one part of the cell to another part of the cell, there's an entire circulation process actually going on within those cells. All of the circulation is a target for the work that we're doing in the treatment process here. Another issue which has great importance in terms of the overall functioning of your body is that many of the chemicals of the body are water soluble, and indeed there are certain of them which are only fat soluble. So generally speaking, we're talking about things being fat soluble and water soluble, and it comes as no surprise perhaps when we're thinking about the business of weight management, and given that fat is a huge component of the whole issue around weight management, but so is water. So water is incredibly important in terms of the whole process of fat management as well within the body. Then the fact that these different chemicals are being dissolved in and out of both the fat and the water, we can see that the fat is very important in the physiology of the body, and also the water is very important in the physiology of the body. The same thing goes for the toxicity. So we mentioned a little bit there earlier about the fears that the body has about the water becoming poisoned. Well, many of the toxins which we're ingesting, and particularly in our modern world, agricultural chemicals and that type of thing, they are predominantly actually fat soluble. So the same sort of fears that we're talking about in our body's water being toxic or poisonous, those same sorts of things actually occur within the fat soluble component of these materials as well. And indeed we actually focus on this much more in depth in a later section of the treatment protocol when we're actually looking directly at toxicity. So the last thing I want to mention is the issue of heavy water, and I talked a little bit about this earlier on the philosophy video, but I just want to go into a little bit more deeply here. So when we're talking about the concept of heavy water, we're looking at a normal water molecule as being two hydrogens and one oxygen atom. So we're talking about the actual molecular structure of a water molecule. Now, from you get many different variations of a water molecule, and they are what they call isotopes. And the very common one is where you have an additional neutron added into it. So you have one proton, one neutron, and this is inside the hydrogens we're talking about. So inside the hydrogen atom we have a proton, an electron under normal circumstances, and in the case of heavy water you're actually having a hydrogen and a neutron plus also the electron. And the importance of this is absolutely dramatic in terms of the physiology of the body. So when you have a heavy water molecule which exists within your body, so there are, I don't know, we can make up numbers, but there's billions or trillions of them. There'll be trillions of these heavy water molecules actually inside my body right at the moment, and they're quite peacefully going about their business. They're doing their job as they should do. The key thing to be aware of is that these heavy water molecules are incredibly more reactive inside the body than the standard water molecules. And so the delivery and the availability of these highly reactive water molecules to the appropriate position within the chemical processing of the cell is very, very important. And it's not something that you can do anything about with drugs. It's not anything you can do with in most normal types of treatment. However, from a consciousness perspective, we can bring focus to the potential for the right molecules to be at the right place at the right time. So it's a time and place, the correctness of the time and place for the actual chemical processing that's going on is a fundamental opportunity that we actually have within the treatment protocol. Okay, well, that's the end of what I want to talk to you about within the science section of water, and it's only a very brief outline of what we're doing in terms of the focus that we're using within the subliminal messaging of the program. However, I think it gives you a bit of an idea of the major headline items that we're actually covering. I hope you really have found that useful, and I'm really looking forward to getting some feedback from you through the Facebook forum, so that I can actually adapt these videos as they're being created, so that you're actually receiving the kind of information that you're looking for. So look forward to hearing from you, and in the meantime, stay TRIM.